Sagittarius. The truth they hid is about to explode. Destiny strikes and fortune returns to you. Sagittarius, do you feel it? That quiet unrest, the strange sense that something big is moving behind the curtain of your life? That sensation that, no matter how still things appear on the surface, something beneath is about to shift, erupt, awaken? You're not imagining it. You're not being paranoid or dramatic. What you're sensing is real. Because for years now, something sacred has been buried inside you. Not lost, not broken, simply hidden, protected, covered beneath old expectations, old betrayals, and the dust of dreams you thought had died. But Sagittarius, nothing truly sacred can stay hidden forever. And now that hidden power, that long-forgotten promise, that light you once gave up trying to ignite, it's cracking through the illusion like a volcano through stone. They tried to bury your voice, to make you believe your light was too much, to convince you that wanting more, hoping more, being more was dangerous. But today a gate is opening. And not just any gate. A 7-year gate. A karmic portal that only reveals itself when the soul has finally become ready. And you, Sagittarius, are ready now. Because what's coming is not just a truth. It's a detonation. A cosmic explosion of clarity, purpose, and fortune that no one, not even those who tried to silence you, can stop. Let's begin. Gate 1. The 7-year flame was never extinguished, only guarded. Sagittarius, your soul has always known it wasn't built for quiet survival. It wasn't designed to dim itself in the shadows of others, to settle for borrowed wisdom, or to shrink into stillness just to feel safe. You were born for the flame, for the wild brilliance of a life lived with meaning. And now, something ancient and sacred is stirring. Not outside of you, but within. Something you buried 7 years ago, or perhaps even longer. A part of you that once blazed unapologetically, then slowly, quietly disappeared beneath layers of responsibility, heartbreak, disappointment, and silence. It didn't die. It never does in a Sagittarius. It waited, watched, guarded itself like a lantern behind the veil of time. And now the time has arrived. The flame wants to live again. This isn't your imagination. That strange restlessness you've been feeling at night. The eerie sense that a forgotten memory is circling back. Those glimpses of your own potential flashing in your mind like distant stars. That's the call. It isn't a coincidence. It's a gate. And not everyone hears it. But you, Sagittarius, always do. Even when you're exhausted. Even when your heart is heavy. Even when your faith feels threadbare. You've always been the one to answer the soul's call. Even if it costs you everything. That's what makes you different. That's what makes you chosen. You've been holding a vibration, a quiet pulse of hope, even when the world mocked it. While others told you to lower your expectations to be realistic, you dared to believe in freedom, in expansion, in truth. And yes, sometimes that belief brought pain. You were betrayed by people who couldn't match your fire. You were discouraged by structures that feared your honesty. You were exhausted from giving so much light, only to be met with silence. But still you didn't turn bitter. Still you didn't trade your vision for cynicism. That kind of soul resilience is rare. And now finally heaven is responding. For the past 7 years life has been quietly preparing you. Everything you thought was a delay was actually divine choreography. Every rejection, every pause, every closed door was part of a sacred rhythm. Your soil had to be broken. Your heart had to be softened. Your voice had to fall silent long enough to truly hear your own truth again. That's the secret most people miss. Destiny isn't rushed. And when it comes for a Sagittarius, it never comes small. It arrives like a great wind behind your wings. And that moment, your moment, is here. There's something else, Sagittarius. You've seen signs. You've just forgotten how to name them. The feather that landed on your windshield when you were thinking of walking away. The old journal you found tucked in a drawer that reminded you of who you used to be. The breeze that carried a memory so vivid it made you stop mid-step. These are not oddities. These are whispers from the other side of time. They are your soul's way of saying, we are not done. We are just returning. And just like that, the 7-year gate opens, not because you pushed it open, but because you were finally still enough to be invited in. In Buddhist wisdom, they say karma ripens like fruit, but only when the tree is ready. In the Christian scriptures it is written, to everything there is a season, a time to reap what was sown. And you, Sagittarius, are stepping into your harvest season, the sacred one, not of effort but of energy, not of striving but of alignment. This is the season when all that was taken, delayed, distorted, or hidden begins to return to you in forms you never expected, because you finally remembered who you are. And who are you? You are the sacred traveler, the philosopher of fire, the truth bearer who dares to walk away from what is false, even if it means walking alone. You are the bridge between worlds, the flame between heavens. And no one else could carry your path because no one else has your blueprint. That is why the journey has felt so lonely. That is why you've questioned everything. Because your gate could not be entered with borrowed beliefs. You had to strip everything down to your essence. And now, naked in spirit, you are finally ready to walk through. If something in you is trembling right now, if your breath has slowed or your heart is fluttering, don't be afraid. That's not fear, it's recognition. Your soul remembers what your mind forgot. The way forward isn't a new road. It's the return to the path you left behind when the world convinced you it was too much. But Sagittarius, you were never too much. You were too vast for a world not yet ready for your light. Until now. Before we continue, I ask you to pause. Place your hand over your chest and whisper, I am ready to remember what I was born to become. That one sentence said with truth has the power to split timelines wide open. Because truth is how the soul calls its power back. And yours is echoing through the stars tonight. In the next gate, you'll finally face the one who tried to hide your light, and the reason they will never be able to again. Gate 2. They tried to dim you, but you were meant to burn brighter. Sagittarius, you've spent more time than you admit wondering what exactly went wrong. Not in a bitter way, not to keep yourself trapped in the past, but because deep inside you sense that something or someone once clipped your wings before you had the chance to truly fly. And the most painful part? It was someone you trusted. Someone who smiled while you dimmed. Someone who spoke gently while planting doubt. Not always with cruelty, but with fear, with insecurity, with their own tangled shadows. And you, being the soul of light you are, believe them. There's a pattern that forms early for those born under your sign. You enter this world shining, speaking truths even when you're too young to understand them. You feel when someone's words don't match their energy. You ask uncomfortable questions. You dream wide and wild and without apology. And somewhere along the line, someone tells you that's not allowed. Maybe it was a parent who praised you only when you played it safe. Maybe it was a teacher who labeled you too bold, too unfocused, too idealistic. Or maybe it was someone you loved with your whole heart, someone who saw your fire and mistook it for a threat. They didn't know how to hold someone like you, so they didn't. Instead, they slowly made you question yourself. Don't get your hopes up. Be realistic. You're always trying to do too much. First you brushed it off. But over time, their words carved grooves into your self-image. You started shrinking yourself in rooms where you once danced freely. You began editing your thoughts before speaking, measuring your emotions, softening your vision just enough to fit into spaces that were never made for you. And you told yourself, this is maturity. This is wisdom. But it wasn't. It was survival. Sagittarius, this gate is where you remember what was stolen and begin to take it back. Not with rage, not with retaliation, but with clarity. The truth is, they never truly saw you. They saw potential they couldn't control. They saw power they didn't know how to stand beside. And rather than grow with you, they asked you to bend. But the thing about fire is, it doesn't bend. It transforms. And when it's suppressed for too long, it doesn't disappear. It builds pressure. It waits. And then one day it explodes, not to destroy but to liberate. This is that day. And here's what they never expected. That even after everything, you would still choose to believe. That even after being silenced, you'd still find your voice. That after all the times you were made to feel small, you would one day rise not in rebellion, but in truth. And when truth rises in a Sagittarius soul, it doesn't need permission. It simply arrives like dawn. Quiet, golden, and unstoppable. You've spent years holding yourself back, not because you lacked courage, but because you made a silent agreement. If I stay small, maybe they'll stay close. If I sacrifice enough, maybe I'll finally be chosen. And for a while it felt easier that way. But ease is not your path. Freedom is. And freedom never lives in the arms of those who love you only when you're convenient. There's a wordless kind of grief that forms when your light is not met with celebration, but with resistance. It buries itself beneath smiles, achievements, relationships. But it never disappears. It just waits for the right moment to be seen. That moment is now. If you've been feeling exhausted for no reason, if you've been sensing the end of things without understanding why, know this. It's not because you're broken. It's because your soul is shedding the agreements it never truly consented to, the roles you played to be accepted, the dreams you delayed to be loved, the silence you held to be safe. You don't need to hate those who misunderstood you, but you do need to release the weight of trying to explain yourself to people who were never listening with their hearts. You were never meant to fit into boxes. You were meant to lift lids off of them. And as long as you keep waiting for their validation, you'll keep postponing your own destiny. So take a breath. Deeper. Now whisper these words not for anyone else, but for yourself. I withdraw the power I gave to those who feared my light. That's not spite. That's sacred reclamation. That's the moment when the Sagittarius within stops apologizing for existing. You're going to feel lighter now, but not in the way you expect. This isn't a happiness that arrives like fireworks. It's the kind of lightness that comes when a heavy silence finally breaks. When you stop carrying stories that were never yours. When you let go of the belief that you had to earn your right to shine. And here's the truth the world often forgets. When a Sagittarius remembers who they are, everything changes. Not just for them, but for everyone around them. You were never just healing yourself. You were breaking patterns carried across generations. Your rising is not personal. It's ancestral. That's why it feels so hard. That's why your flame was hidden. Not because you weren't ready, but because the world wasn't ready to receive someone who walks with that kind of fire and still chooses gentleness. You didn't come here to fit in. You came here to transform. And that transformation begins now. Not with a shout, not with a fight, but with one quiet decision. I choose myself. In the next gate, we will explore the full return of your light. The very power someone once tried to bury, now rising with force. Stay with me. Gate 3. The return of what was taken, and the light that could not be buried. Sagittarius, if you're feeling like something inside you is cracking, not from pain but from release, then know this. The moment your soul has been preparing for has already begun. You may not see it on the outside just yet. Life might still look familiar. But internally, in the silent cathedral of your being, the light is shifting. Not because someone gave it to you, but because no one could ever truly take it from you. For so long, it felt like the best parts of you were hidden under layers of dust, of doubt, of decisions made from fear instead of love. You questioned your worth not because you were lost, but because someone else's blindness made you forget how brightly you were born to shine. There were dreams you tucked away not because they were too big, but because the world made you feel too small. You were told, it's not your time. And somehow, over the years, you believed them. But destiny has its own timeline. It doesn't operate by clocks or calendars. It moves according to readiness. Not the world's, but yours. And now, Sagittarius, something ancient inside of you is stirring again. It's the original promise you made when your soul chose this life. The promise to remember your light, no matter who tried to bury it. Do you remember when it first dimmed? Maybe it was the moment someone dismissed your ideas with a laugh that stung more than words. Or when you gave love so fully to someone who couldn't hold even half of it. Maybe it was subtle, the way you started editing yourself in conversations, shrinking your laughter, diluting your opinions. You didn't want to cause waves. You just wanted to be accepted. So you became quieter, softer, less you. And yet the fire never left. Sagittarius, you were born with fire in your soul. Not the kind that destroys, but the kind that illuminates. You are not here to be manageable. You are here to be free. You are here to teach others what it means to walk with truth, even when it trembles. And now that fire buried beneath years of survival is coming back with a roar. But not to scorch the past. It's here to light the way forward. There is something returning to you now. You may not know its name. You may feel it as restlessness, as tears without reason, as sudden clarity in the quietest moment of your day. What's returning is not just your voice. It's your power. The kind you once gave away in exchange for safety. The kind you thought you had to suppress to be loved. The kind that made others uncomfortable, and so you learned to hide it piece by precious piece. But power like yours cannot be buried. Not truly. It sleeps. It waits. And when the time is right, when you are ready, it rises. It rises not with noise but with inevitability. Like the tide, like the sun, like truth. And when it rises, Sagittarius, it brings with it everything that was once taken. Opportunities that were withheld. Blessings that were delayed. Love that was postponed, not denied, only deferred until you could receive it without self-doubt, without the need to prove yourself worthy. You've already proven that. Just by surviving with your heart intact. Just by still believing after everything that good things are possible. There is someone who once underestimated you. Maybe more than one. They thought you would never rise again, not because you weren't strong, but because they projected their own limitations onto you. They feared what you might become without their approval. They feared how far you could go if you stopped asking for permission. And now they are beginning to feel the consequences, not because you sought revenge, but because the light is returning to where it always belonged. There's a force in the universe that no one can alter. Spiritual equilibrium. What was stolen must be restored. What was silenced must speak. What was buried must bloom. Not because you fight for it, but because you finally stop fighting yourself. You've been preparing for this moment longer than you know. Every heartbreak that didn't make sense, every door that shut in your face, every loss that felt unbearable. It was all guiding you back to this threshold, this reclamation. And now the universe is opening what was once closed. But here's the truth. It's not just about getting what was taken. It's about realizing that you've always been enough without it. It's about standing in your light so firmly that even the shadows have no place left to hide. It's about becoming the version of yourself that no longer depends on external validation to know you matter. There will be signs. You might wake up one morning and realize the anxiety you've carried like second skin is simply gone. You'll speak your truth and feel no fear of being misunderstood. You'll look in the mirror and recognize yourself. Not the masked version who tried to fit in, but the wild, radiant soul who finally remembers how to be free. And yes, someone may try to return. Someone from the past who once saw your fire and asked you to dim it. Don't hate them, but don't hand them the match either. Let them see you now, not to prove anything, but to witness what a soul becomes when it chooses itself. You are not the person they left. You are not the person who once begged to be seen. You are the person who now walks with quiet certainty, who no longer needs to be chosen, because you've already chosen yourself. The return of your light is not a celebration for others. It's a homecoming for you. It's the first time in years you breathe without holding back. It's the first time you smile and feel it all the way to your bones. It's the first time your joy isn't conditional. Sagittarius, this isn't just a turning point. It's a soul ignition. And the universe is leaning in, whispering, yes, now. In Gate 4, we will explore what it means to live fully in your truth, and why your rising will shake the very foundations of those who once doubted your strength. Gate 4. Living in the full light of your truth, and the quiet collapse of their illusions. Sagittarius, when you finally choose yourself, truly choose yourself without guilt, without hesitation, without the lingering hope that someone will return and recognize your worth, you begin to live in a frequency that no longer entertains illusions. And those illusions, they begin to fall. Not with drama, not with noise, but with quiet collapse. Like old scaffolding losing purpose once the temple is whole again. You're not angry anymore. That's what confuses them the most. You don't shout. You don't try to explain. You've stopped replaying the old scenes in your mind, stopped rehearsing what you wish you had said, stopped waiting for closure. Because something deeper than justice has taken its place, peace. And that peace, Sagittarius, is disruptive. To those who built their sense of control on your silence, your peace is unsettling. To those who fed off your energy but never truly honored your heart, your self-love is threatening. And to the ones who watched you shrink yourself for years, your rising feels like an earthquake they can't stop, but must now live through. You're no longer here to maintain false harmony. You're here to embody truth. There was a time when your power was buried so deeply, even you forgot where you left it. It wasn't lost. It was just sleeping, waiting for your permission to awaken. And now that it has, now that you've stepped into it fully, nothing can remain that was built on illusion. Their stories about you, their projections, their attempts to mold you into something more palatable, easier to control, none of it can survive the clarity you now carry. And yet, you don't gloat. You don't need to. Because this isn't about revenge. It never was. This is about restoration, a return to balance, a cosmic course correction where everything they once took, your time, your trust, your tenderness, has found its way home, back to you. But this part of the journey can feel strange, almost surreal, because you may look around and realize that the people who once stood closest are now quietly falling away. Not because you pushed them, but because the vibration has changed. The version of you they knew, the one who needed their approval, who said yes out of fear, who kept her light dim just to feel safe, that version no longer exists. And without her, they have nothing to hold on to. Some may try to return, not out of love but out of confusion, because your energy once gave them something they didn't know how to name, but deeply depended on. They may come softly, just checking in. I was thinking about you. I had a dream about you last night. They might bring apologies or silence. They might bring nostalgia, or new lies wrapped in nicer words. But you won't be moved. Not because you've hardened, but because you've healed. You'll hear the same voice that once shattered you, and this time it will sound like wind, present but unable to penetrate. You'll look into familiar eyes, and see the absence behind them. Not the absence of feeling, but the absence of depth. The very thing they couldn't give you no matter how close they stood. And in that moment you'll understand why it had to end, why they had to leave, why it was never about your flaws or your timing or your value. It was always about misalignment. And now finally you're aligned with yourself. This is where everything changes. Your relationships evolve. You stop seeking validation from those who can't even meet themselves. You stop entertaining conversations that feel like chores. You no longer twist your spirit into 1,000 shapes to be palatable. Instead, you become magnetic. Not to everyone, just to the ones who speak your language of depth and fire and truth. This is when new people arrive. Those who don't flinch at your intensity, who don't shrink from your brilliance. They see you not as too much, but as just enough. And they don't want to own your light. They want to stand in it with you. And this, Sagittarius, is where fortune truly begins. Because fortune isn't just money. It's being met where you are. It's walking into rooms where your softness isn't a liability, where your dreams aren't too big, where your truth doesn't echo back in silence. It's waking up without a weight on your chest. It's laughing without fear. It's being able to sit with yourself and feel whole. This is what's been waiting for you. The quiet luxury of being fully yourself. And yes, while you rise, their world may quietly unravel. Those who once distorted the truth will face it. Not by your doing, but by the universe's grace. You don't need to wish them harm. The truth itself will be enough. Their false constructs will crumble. Their confidence built on borrowed light will dim, because you've stopped feeding them. And now they must face what remains without your energy sustaining it. But let that not concern you. Your task is not to watch their collapse. Your task is to nurture your own expansion. Because when you rise into your authentic self, you stop being reactive and start being sovereign. You no longer orbit other people's dysfunction. You become the sun around which only truth can revolve. So breathe. You are not selfish for choosing peace over performance. You are not cruel for withdrawing from what harms you. You are not cold for being done with pretending. You are free. Gate 5. Becoming the vessel for what was always yours. Sagittarius, now that you've stepped fully into your truth, there's no going back to the old version of you. The one who waited for signs, who needed permission to feel worthy, who carried guilt simply for needing love in its realest form. That version has dissolved like fog under sunrise. What stands in her place is you, not new, but revealed. Not changed, but remembered. And now your energy begins to shift. It no longer reaches outward. It doesn't chase. It doesn't plead. It becomes a quiet gravitational pull, a frequency so clear, so refined that only what's aligned can find you. And that's the first sign of your true abundance. It doesn't require you to fight for it, because what's yours doesn't arrive through effort. It arrives through embodiment. Let that sink in. You don't have to perform anymore. You don't have to outperform your past to be worthy of your future. The universe is not waiting for you to be perfect, Sagittarius. It's waiting for you to be present. Not just with the world, but with yourself. The moment you stop disowning your needs, your dreams, your quiet desires, the moment you stop calling them too much, or not yet, you step into alignment with the life that was always meant for you. And that life is already calling your name. This new chapter won't unfold in grand declarations. It will begin with a single breath taken without urgency. A morning where you don't rush to earn your right to exist. A conversation where you speak your truth without bracing for rejection. A decision you make from your gut, not from guilt. These are sacred moments. These are abundance. Because abundance isn't just what you have. It's what you no longer tolerate. It's the energy you no longer leak into people who don't see you. It's the silence you no longer keep when something inside says, "This isn't right." It's the self-trust that builds like a fire in your chest, warming every room you enter, whether anyone else notices or not. Abundance is not waiting outside of you, Sagittarius. It's been waiting inside, covered in the dust of self-doubt, in the buried corners where you stored your childhood shame, your inherited silence, your quiet griefs that no one could name. And now it's ready to rise. Not like a wave crashing in, but like water remembering the shape of the ocean it came from. This is the season when you start receiving, not because you've finally done enough, but because you've finally stopped resisting the truth. You've always been enough. So what does receiving actually look like? It looks like ease in places where you once fought for breath. It looks like saying yes to what nourishes you without explaining. Saying no to what drains you without apologizing. It's the confidence that walks beside you when you apply for what you thought was too far beyond you. It's the safety in your own skin when you no longer dim your joy to avoid envy. It's realizing you are no longer asking for what you deserve. You are expecting it. And what's coming to meet you in this frequency? So much more than material reward. Love, not the kind that requires you to fix, to perform, to prove, but the kind that sits with you, sees you, and says, "I'm not here to change you. I'm here because you are already complete." Opportunities, not the kind you claw for in scarcity, but the ones that come because your energy is magnetic to your mission. Healing, not in the form of sudden epiphanies, but in the steady dissolving of old patterns that no longer hold power over you. You'll wake up one day and realize, "I haven't thought about that pain in weeks." And it won't be because you buried it deeper, but because it finally had permission to leave. And yes, even wealth. But not as a test, as a mirror. Because when you finally see your own worth, the universe rushes to reflect it. You don't have to hustle yourself to exhaustion anymore. You were never meant to live in survival. That was never your destiny. Your destiny is presence. And through that presence, the divine will provide. Some might not understand this shift in you. They'll say you've changed. They'll call you distant. They'll say you've grown cold. But it's not coldness, Sagittarius. It's clarity, and it's contagious, because when you stand in your fullness unapologetically without theatrics, just with quiet knowing, you become the permission slip for others to do the same. And maybe that's your deeper purpose. Not to save anyone, not to prove your goodness, but to live so fully in your own light that others remember they have one too. But remember, not everyone will rise with you. Some will try to pull you back into old dynamics, old roles, old narratives where you stayed small to make others feel safe. Let them go. Not with bitterness, but with blessings. Because your growth is not an insult. It's an invitation. And those who can walk beside you now, they'll feel different. They'll meet you in presence, not projection. They'll love you in partnership, not performance. They'll witness your power and not be intimidated by it. They'll come not to complete you, but to join you. So don't rush this next chapter. Let it unfold with the same patience you once gave everyone else. Let yourself receive what's already circling you in spirit. Let yourself trust that you don't have to strive to be seen anymore. You already are. Gate 6. When destiny arrives dressed as peace. Sagittarius, this is the part no one prepares you for. Not because it's painful, but because it's quiet. The explosion already happened. The shadows have already retreated. You've already broken open, bled truth, stood in the fire, and chosen not to burn but to become light. So what now? Now you integrate. You don't run. You don't chase. You don't perform for blessings. You become the field in which they bloom. This is when destiny stops feeling like thunder and starts sounding like silence. This is when the fortune you prayed for doesn't knock loudly. It waits at the edge of your awareness, asking, "Will you recognize me without drama? Will you let me arrive gently? Or will you dismiss me because I didn't come wrapped in suffering?" You see, we are conditioned to expect miracles to look like shockwaves. But real miracles, they look like peace. like sleeping well again, like not explaining your joy, like sipping your coffee and realizing you're no longer bracing for impact. That is abundance. That is destiny. And that is what's arriving now. But to receive it fully, you must allow the past to remain where it belongs, behind you. Yes, someone once hid your light. Yes, they shaped your inner script, telling you not to hope too high, not to dream too wildly. But that voice no longer holds the pen. You do. The karmic cord has been cut. Their story was never your destiny. And now, every time your soul starts to contract, afraid it's too good to be true, that's your old programming. And you can smile at it like an old acquaintance. Thank you for trying to protect me, but I'm not surviving anymore. I'm living. And living doesn't mean rushing. It doesn't mean filling the silence. It means learning to be still with your new energy, to understand it, to savor it, to respect its rhythm. You are no longer on the outside of your life, Sagittarius. You're in it, deeply, consciously, fully. And maybe for the first time, you're beginning to understand why everything before had to unfold the way it did. Not as punishment, but as preparation. The betrayals that broke you, they sharpened your discernment. The delays that nearly crushed your spirit, they carved out deeper trust. The silence, that unbearable silence, it taught you to listen beyond sound, to sense alignment like a sacred pulse beneath the noise. And now that pulse is guiding you home. Not a physical place, a soul place. This new version of you doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. She doesn't need to prove her worth to deserve love. He doesn't need applause to believe in his magic. They don't need to relive the trauma to claim healing. You simply are. Enough. Anchored. Activated. And here's the final truth that the universe whispers only when you're truly ready. What's coming now isn't coming to test you. It's coming to reflect you. You no longer attract what wounds you. You now attract what sees you, what expands you, what honors you, because you finally returned to yourself. You are the living proof that peace is not the absence of chaos. It is the presence of wholeness. And when people look at you now, they'll feel something they can't explain. A calmness, a clarity, a soft power. That is the vibration of destiny fulfilled. It doesn't shout. It radiates. So don't be surprised when the very thing you thought you lost, the dream, the connection, the abundance, the clarity, finds its way back to you now. Not because you needed it, but because you remembered you were never missing anything in the first place. This is not a new chapter, Sagittarius. This is a new book. One where your name is on the cover. One where your voice is the narrator. One where the ending is not written by fate but co-created with faith. Close your eyes. Take one deep breath. Say this with your soul. I no longer seek the path. I am the path. I no longer wait for the light. I carry it. And now let it unfold. You are ready. Glowing star conclusion. The sacred unfolding of who you've always been. So here we are, Sagittarius. At the place you thought you were seeking, only to realize it was seeking you all along. This is not the kind of ending that slams shut with a loud bang. This is the kind of ending that opens, like petals to the morning sun, like a soul remembering its song after lifetimes of silence. You are not who you were at the start of this message. Not because you've changed, but because you've returned. Returned to the center, to truth, to the version of you that existed before they doubted you, before the delays, before the weight of trying to be what the world wanted. And now, dear one, you are standing still, but nothing is stagnant. Everything is blooming within you. You no longer beg for miracles. You breathe them. You no longer chase signs. You are the sign. You no longer wait for validation. You know. And that knowing is everything. It is the sacred fire behind your decisions. It is the clarity in your no, the courage in your yes, the tenderness in your boundaries. It is the light that no longer dims just to keep the peace. You've remembered your power, Sagittarius, not as force but as frequency. And in that frequency, you are now drawing toward you the very abundance that once felt distant. People who speak your soul's language. Opportunities that reflect your highest alignment. A love that meets you in your fullness, not your fragments. Not because you're lucky, because you're ready. So now, as the light returns to your hands, I leave you with this one final breath. I do not fear what's coming. I am what's coming. And I carry nothing but the truth of who I am. If this journey touched something inside of you, leave a small symbol in the comments. A flame fire, a bow and arrow, or the simple words, "I am the light now." Because sometimes a single word becomes the gate through which another soul walks back to their truth. And if you're still here, still listening, still open, then this message was always meant for you. You are not alone. We walk beside you. Always. Sophia.